Welcome to another Raw Men episode. It's been a while since we've done one of these. I'm talking with Samuel Fieldman, who is on the National Council for Wolf-PAC, a leading voice in the struggle to end corruption of money in politics, which is something that's been bothering me personally for quite some time, and obviously has the nation on edge. So, Mr. Fieldman,
Hi, it's
no,
nice to meet you.
hi, good to meet you, sir. Please tell me what is the issue, what you're about.
So, Wolfpack started 10 years ago with Citizens United being big in the news. That certainly wasn't the first thing that brought the corrupting influence of money in politics to light, and it certainly wasn't the last, nor is it even the most important. Uh, but that was one that really started dominating headlines. And that was around the time our founder, Cenk Uygur, started a new organization seeking to take on the problem that was Supreme Court decisions dating back all the way to 1976, up through decisions that happened just this summer, uh, that really made it impossible for the laws that we'd passed through the states and the federal government that were intended to fight the influence of money in politics to actually do so. There have been studies done that show that a return on investment in the thousands of percents for campaign contributions. Studies showing that whatever the few people in the donor class want, uh, what Congress does correlates with that nearly 100%, whereas what the majority of the public wants, it correlates essentially 0%. So the issues were really very present. Now, at that time, I had started looking into a solution. I had twins who were on their way. My wife was pregnant. And I wanted them to grow up in a world um, where they could actually have some say in what the country was going to be like and how their government was going to work, all of that kind of stuff. And I was a young lawyer. I was in the Attorney General's office in New York in the Public Integrity Bureau there at the time. Um, and that position was a temporary position that had just ended. And I was studying the Constitution, trying to figure out how we could change this problem. And I found the Article 5 convention method. In the Constitution, there's two methods for amending the Constitution. And that's the only way that you can go over the heads of the Supreme Court with decisions like Buckley v. Vallejo and others that have made it impossible to pass laws because those laws get overturned. So there's two methods to amend the Constitution. One is by a 2/3 vote in both the House and the Senate. And frankly, given that given the corruption, there's zero chance that they're actually going to propose an amendment that will end the way that they got into office, that will end their own gravy train and end all of that. And then the other method outlined by our founders, which I had found in there, was a convention called by the states, specifically limited to that purpose for which it was called. And that had never been done to completion before, but it had been used as an effective tool for actually more than half of the amendments. Um, what I also realized is that there's no way that I could possibly start an organization that could do that. You need a really big voice, a really loud voice that has a lot of reach in order to get that going. It's impossible to amend the Constitution in a partisan way. It's impossible to amend the Constitution with a small group or in a secretive way. You need a big, loud movement that has people who otherwise would not get along well at all, um, who fight against each other on every other issue, but fight together on this. And that's when I saw Cenk Uygur announce Wolfpack, which was using this exact same method for this exact same purpose. And I signed up on day one, and I've been with Wolfpack ever since.
I'm getting the impression that you're talking about something where the administrative leaders are never going to do this, that it has to be a concerted grassroots movement in order to change anything.
Absolutely.
And sadly, it seems that in order to get anything proper done, that's what's going to happen. Because I've been frustrated since I know at least Since 2016, I've been severely upset at the corruption on both sides of the aisle with the way that money controls everything. I live in Texas,
Hmm.
and our governor, Rick Perry, prior to that, was receiving huge donations from various companies. And then when he would receive $100,000 or whatever from any given industry, there would be legislation benefiting that industry within 30 days.
Yep.
And I was amazed that there are no legal charges for that sort of thing. I mean, it was happening over and over again, almost month to month. And so it seems that we are. I know that I've read that we are at least a corporatocracy in some sense because the big money controls where everything goes, and it's no longer about the law in that's supposed to be the basis of the republic. And very concerning to me.
Yeah, one of the first rallies that we had actually was in Texas. We There was a rally on a, a pro gun rally on one side of the Capitol, and we were on the other side. And we're single issue, so we do not get involved one way or the other on that. But some of the people from that rally came over to listen to what we were saying, and they ended up joining us because yeah, they very much agreed. On name the issue on any issue in politics. If it's a gun issue, you don't want if you favor gun rights, you don't want Mike Bloomberg donating $1 billion to end your influence. If you are opposed to more guns, you don't want the NRA donating their money. Ultimately, it should be we, the people, the words in my backdrop here, that are actually debating and deciding, and we can disagree on everything else. But what we should agree on is that we, the people, should actually decide what the laws are going to be. Not the way Larry Lessig, who was one of the, we refer to him sometimes as the godfather of this movement. He's one of the driving forces behind the legal theory and aspects of it. He gave a great TED talk called Lesterland, where he compared the number of donors that actually decide who gets to run for president before we actually have the real primary where people are voting. There's first the donor primary, where they determine who even gets a chance to run. And he referred to the percentage of the American population that donates enough to actually matter there to the percentage of the American population named Lester. So imagine a system where you can vote. That's fine. You can vote for Democrat or Republican, and you can vote for this group of any one of these few Democrats or any one of these few Republicans. But before you get a chance to do that, just the people named Lester are going to decide which candidates those are going to be. And that's essentially the system that we have here in this country right now.
Yeah. No, I like you. I try to keep my opinion out to as few policies as I'm educated on and passionate about. I don't try to be too diverse, like you mentioned the gun thing. That's not an issue for me that I even speak on. And there are a number of others that I try to keep quiet about because maybe my opinion isn't solid on
Hmm.
all of those. I can sway either way, but I am disgusted at the grotesque corruption within the various governments of my own country and the things that they get away with. I mean, when I was studying government in school, I remember when the first time as a kid when I read about the filibuster, I'm like, this is what adults, this is how adults decided that they should present cases that just literally waste everybody's time to prevent any progress. This was a plan, and that's how they wanted to do this.
Except it
I was
wasn't really
amazed.
a plan, but it was a more historical accident. But
Apologize. Shut up. Shut up. I
my
shouldn't do
daughter
these
would
during
get
the day
jealous.
because somebody comes by the door all the time.
My daughter
Yeah.
would get jealous. I'm on a podcast with a dog. My daughter's a huge
Yeah.
dog lover.
So a lot of the things that I've seen in the way the government operates is just frustrating to me. The laws that they pass because we are beholden to the fossil fuel industry here in
Mhm.
Texas. So Tesla sets up a manufacturing center, and then people are trying to pass legislation that you can't buy an electric car that was manufactured here. You got to go out of state to buy
Yep.
the car that was made here. Just whatever they can to impede people buying electric cars because they want to keep everything in fossil fuel. All the propaganda that's run through the news. I mean, people see money in politics. They don't realize how much money is in the news.
Oh yeah.
You
I
remember
mean,
when there
how
was a
many times
time
have
when
you
they tried to
seen?
do
How many times have you
fair and balanced, and there was a time when fair and balanced didn't mean the consensus on one side and the lone whack job on the other. But that's what they do now.
When was
And
the
so
last time you saw a Boeing ad on CNN? And when was the last time you were in the market for a 737? I mean, that they're not, the ads are not aimed at you. The ads are aimed at the news business because they want to give them money so that they will get favorable coverage. I mean, Boeing is a war contractor. That's why they advertise on CNN.
so beyond my uh, list of minor frustrations, what is your plan? How do you see this going? What is the strategy here?
So Wolfpack right now is actually retooling. We have come to the conclusion we had in our first few years, we passed in 5 states: Vermont, New Jersey, California, Rhode Island, and Illinois. And that was all kind of before real opposition started cropping up. And we've seen major opposition on the left and the right. On the left, it's been the John Birch Society, which is an organization that, frankly, I didn't know still existed until I met them in New Hampshire. And the Eagle Forum, which is an equally conspiratorial organization that killed the Equal Rights Amendment. On the left, it's been primarily Common Cause and a lot of their allies. People don't tend to realize that Common Cause is a dark money group. They don't disclose any of their donors. And I suspect that influences their decisions on this. I can't say that for sure. There's also a long history of them specifically opposing the Balanced Budget Amendment, which also has been attempting to use this same tool for a different purpose and just trying to attack the tool rather than the policy. So it might just be inertia. And those same groups, John Birch Society and Eagle Forum, also opposed the Balanced Budget Amendment as a policy from the right. They were afraid that we would limit that balancing the budget would mean increasing taxes rather than decreasing spending. And so they were opposed from the other side on that. And all those groups that oppose the Balanced Budget Amendment from both the left and the right are opposing the process rather than the policy, and that's still the case today. And we're actually seeing that play out right now in New Jersey, which is what I've been working on for the last week or so. And I'll get back to the way we're retooling in just a second. But in New Jersey right now, they're specifically afraid of an 1861 convention call that was specifically limited for slavery and fighting against the Civil War. And it was limited to that purpose. And they're afraid that that will be used together with other calls for a balanced budget amendment. And opponents of the balanced budget amendment want to get rid of the 1861 call and all of the other calls along with it in New Jersey, including ours, in order to try to fight against the balanced budget amendment. Now, I know the guy behind this idea of combining it. His name is David Bidoff. He's fundamentally wrong on the idea that you can use that 1861 call, but just for the sake of argument, let's assume he's correct that you could use that call. And a handful of others that he claims you can use that are supposedly not limited, together with the 26 or 27 calls that are limited just to a balanced budget. So he says you could combine those, and then that would put them at 33 calls. And if you get 34, then you get an amendment specifically on that topic. Well, New Jersey could, if they were afraid of that, just rescind the 1861 call or rescind all of their calls except for ours. And in fact, there's precedent for that. Texas did the same thing in 2017. They rescinded, they had an unlimited call that was clearly, unambiguously not limited. And they rescinded that as well as all of their other calls. except the ones they still agreed with. So they just put in an exemption for those. New Jersey could do the same thing here. But because the kind of gut reaction and inertia of these organizations has been, instead of debating genuinely on these topics and talking about the legal aspects and really playing it straight, has just been to fearmonger, and that's been their strategy. They're trying to rescind all of the calls, including the one from 2014, to end the corrupting influence of money in politics. And in this case, it particularly makes no sense, because if you could count that one, then you would also be able to count our calls from states like Vermont and Rhode Island, in which case there wouldn't be 33, there'd be 35 or 36, and we'd already have more than 34. So not exempting our call makes no sense. But what we find oftentimes, now that we have this kind of professional opposition who knows the legislators, it's very difficult to get them to listen to us, even when we bring in dozens of people to a hearing. Literally, we brought in 36 people to the hearing last week. Had well over 100 people sign up, and this is not nationwide, this is just New Jerseyans sign up nationwide to register their opposition. And it might work, and we'll see. The final vote hasn't happened yet. That's going to be probably on Monday, a week from today. But what we really need is more power, more people to be able to push these things forward, so that politicians have no choice but to listen to us. And the retooling that we've been doing right now is focused around ideas like organizing for power. With Jane McAlevey has a book called No Shortcuts that outlines a lot of those strategies, and other things like that, with the goal of building a broader and much more bipartisan organization that's really able to make sure that its voice gets heard over the voices of the opposition, to make sure that we actually have enough power to take on these moneyed interests.
It's a monumental feat. When I know that a lot of the country they've been convinced by their various news sources that this is a two-sided issue, that everything is a dichotomy, that it's us versus them. It's always this kind of tribalism, and this is where the news, for example, casts everybody who isn't a right-wing conservative is a radical leftist. You can't just be a leftist; you have to be a radical leftist, because there's no such thing as a moderate anything anymore. But anyway, so that's the way the news tells it, and supposedly the way most news sources would convey it is that every Democrat is somehow a leftist, which is also a socialist, which is also, somehow a baby-eating devil worshiper, whatever. They just put everything into one box. What I look at is how every president in my life, Democrat or Republican, have all been right-wing. They've all been on the right side of the political compass. And that when I look specifically at the Democratic Party, I see very few people that would qualify as being on the left. What I see dominating the Democratic Party are what they used to call establishment corporatists, and people that are in the pocket of big companies. And so this is an issue on both sides of the aisle. But unfortunately, most people, you want a grassroots movement, most people in the grassroots are not seeing it that way. They're seeing it as us versus them tribalism, and it's entirely down to the party. We have people here in Texas who have stated in public rallies that have attended with that you were born into the Republican Party and therefore owe your party loyalty, regardless of policy, which I think is a very disturbing. People are not born into a political party.
Yeah.
And it should be about the policies and not just one of them. It should be the collection. What is this person offering? What is this other person offering? What is their plan? What should we go with? But no, if they have an R next to their name, we're going to vote for them because they have an R next to their name, and it doesn't matter what they're suggesting, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that we've found, and we've really tried to take nonpartisanship more and more seriously as we've gone on. It's been part of our goal since the beginning. That's why, even though we were founded by Cenk Uygur, who's pretty far to the left in American politics, he founded us as a separate organization and never really controlled the organization since pretty close to the beginning, specifically because Wolfpack's politics is not Cenk Uygur's politics. He's never taken a dime from the organization, and hasn't been on the board for a couple of years, and even when he was on the board, didn't really control it at all. It was created as a separate organization specifically because his politics are one thing, but this movement requires people who are across the political spectrum who disagree with him about everything else. And we found that recently. We attended a conference at ALEC a couple of weeks ago, and I was there and presented to mostly Republicans, who's at ALEC, and Republican state legislators. They took a vote afterwards, and 2/3 of them agreed with us, which is fantastic. And many of our top allies right now are also on the right, as well as Jamie Raskin, who also spoke. He sent a video to that ALEC event. He was our primary sponsor when he was a state legislator in Maryland, and now he's, of course, in Congress, and still a big supporter of this issue. So we really do see enormous cross-partisan support. And one of the biggest differences, and part of why we're using the route that we're using of going through the states, is that it's not like Congress. A lot of the perception of the partisanship that people see comes from the fact that at the national level, it's so incredibly stark with such animosity and such hatred. And those are the stories that you see from the states that make the national news are like that. And the stories at the national level are also like that. And that's what we're really seeing when we watch television.
And that's exactly what I think, some news organizations or the people behind news organizations would really want. They would want us to be at war with each other for some imagined ideological differences so that we don't look at the policies. If you go into any discussion and the label of where you are in the political compass, or in your religious perspective or whatever, if there's a label that somebody can look at, they're going to assign all of these other stereotypes to that label because nobody thinks rationally anymore. And then nobody's going to hear what you're saying after that, which is another huge frustration in politics.
Yeah. I mean, a great example is a couple of weeks ago, I was talking to Ken Ivory, who's now a big supporter of ours, just reelected to the Utah legislature. He's a big name and influential in the Mormon community. And now here I am on this podcast with you, who are very influential and a big name in the atheist community. And the atheists and the Mormons can fight about whatever they want, but they should ultimately both agree that they, and not the big money interests, are the ones who should be deciding who wins those fights. And it's a battle of ideas, not a battle of money.
Oh, it should be. If only I could reach more people to impart that thought. But I see so many people who only think in terms of dichotomies, and really only kind of just parrot whatever the propaganda is that they're reading. The do your own research people who don't realize they're being fed by an algorithm, so that they're just going to see more of the same of what they've already seen, so that they don't ever actually know what the other perspective is. And they certainly don't understand what that other perspective is. All right, well, Mr. Fieldman, I think we've come to the end of this. I want to thank you for being on, and very productive, I think. Give us a closing statement of where we're going, how people can help, what's on the schedule, and so forth. Take a couple minutes, please.
Sure. So there's a number of things that people should look at if they want to do a little more research, because if you Google the Article 5 convention, what you find is a ton of misinformation, and you find information from people who you would think would be experts, but who've never published on the issue. If you go to wolf-pac.com/review, you can see my analysis of the research with links to primary sources, or wolf-pac.com/resources. You can see some of the most prominent primary resources there as well. Things that are actually published and peer-reviewed, not the political statements and op-eds that people usually see. So if you're curious to learn more about the process and the technical details and debunk some of the things that you may find on Google, that's the first place that I would go, is wolf-pac.com/resources and wolf-pac.com/review. In order to help us, we really need help all over the country. Like I said, we're trying to organize and build for power. Wolf-PAC.com, or you can go to wolf-pac.com/go. PAC, by the way, is PAC, as in Political Action Committee. There's no K on it. And that would be an enormous help. Specifically, if you live in New Jersey, call Speaker Coughlin and let him know that they need to amend the resolution is called ACR 222. And they need to amend that to save the money in politics resolution that it's currently scheduled to remove. And that was a great fight that we did then in 2014. And it's potentially on the chopping block. So Speaker Coughlin and your own personal assembly member, that's who's in charge of that right now. And anybody in New Jersey, call them and make sure that they know how important this issue is and that they do the right thing there. And yeah, as we're rebuilding, we need people in every area who, with every skill set, every level of amount of time that they have, who are dedicated and willing to help on this fight. And it's a long haul, and we've been going for 10 years, and I don't want to be going for another 10. I want to have succeeded in less time than that, and that's going to require a lot of help.
I feel like I've been doing much the same for all these years, struggling very hard against trying to climb up a mudslide is the way I kind of feel politically. All right. Well, Mr. Fieldman, thank you for being on, and we'll have links below to everything you just described.
Thank you very much.